In a world filled with screens and distractions, we invite you to reconnect with the natural world around you. Welcome to Nature Bound, a podcast dedicated to unpacking the intrinsic bond between humans and nature. We'll uncover the benefits of spending time outdoors, including how a nature-centric lifestyle can improve your mental health, elevate your leadership skills, and unleash your creativity. And now here's your host, outdoor enthusiast, and renowned author of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock, Emmanuel Rose.
Thanks for joining me today on the Nature Bound podcast. We're going to have a chance to talk with a very experienced and successful artist and photographer named Jeremy Janus, and we'll have a conversation about how we can spend time outside, leverage our time outside to be more fully in touch with ourselves as human beings and get inspiration to create memories of that inspiration. So welcome, Jeremy, to the show. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So you've got a interesting background in art and different mediums of art. And anything you want to share about that study that you've partaken in?
Yeah, I started, really hiking in nature just to deal with like depression and anxiety, and did that for years without even having a camera, and then got into painting later on. Uh, Really around the time I broke my back and didn't have any options to be outside, and uh, that eventually developed into picking up a camera and doing nature photography. And so it was kind of being able to blend both worlds, and obviously like having a background with like colors and contrast and composition and such really helped me down the road with being able to bring that into nature photography. So I spent the first part of my time in nature really just conceptualizing the world around me, and then being able to capture it later on has really helped me kind of escalate what I've been able to do artistically.
And you live in Colorado right now, is that right?
Yeah. I'm in Westminster, which is about 20 minutes outside of Denver, but it's basically central to all the mountains. I can get to Rocky Mountain National Park in about an hour and a half, which is where this photo's from.
Nice.
I do a lot of snowshoeing, like a lot of snowshoeing, mainly because there's just no people out. And then during the summer, typically this year's been a little bit abnormal with our storms. We haven't had many, but I'm also known for storm chasing out here. So it's kind of like
Cool.
two different worlds, but I can get out that way in about an hour or two. So it helps a lot.
And did you grow up in the Rocky Mountains?
No, I actually grew up in Anaheim, California. So, my first part of life was really just football and sports down there. And I didn't even really start hiking until I turned 18. So, I've moved between California and Colorado 7 times in my life. I've had a kind of a crazy life, but this last time I moved back 8 years ago, and that's actually when I started nature photography as well.
That's cool. Can you share like one of the pivotal moments in your life that led you on this self-discovery, healing, nature journey?
Yeah, honestly, like at 18, I was actually gonna commit suicide, and my dad walked in the basement, and that was when I was living in Colorado the first time. And that kind of got me to realize like I needed to find my passion and purpose again. So I started training to go play college football, and I moved back to California. And the night I moved back down to Southern California, I actually rolled over in my sleep and cracked my back. I was born with like a defect in it, and so I didn't find it for like 6 months. I was still going through spring ball and everything, and then my back just kept getting worse, and they eventually found it. And so that's kind of when I was like, all right, well, my football career is done. So I moved back to Colorado, and that's when I kind of started getting more into hiking and stuff until it got to be unbearable. And then I had my back surgery when I was 21, and then I almost died from that surgery. They got anesthesia in my lungs, so I was in ICU for 3 days, and my lungs were over 50% filled with fluid. So it was really like kind of like a combination of these like really tumultuous years, and then also like when you're on like death's door, it changes everything. And uh, during my football days, I was pretty strong. I squatted about 450 pounds at that time. So when you go from that to never being able to squat over 135 pounds again, it's like it does a number to your psychology. So you have to kind of figure out different ways. And it's funny because, you know, at the time I thought my life was over when my football career ended, but I just realized like my life was really just beginning.
Yeah. Wow. That it's amazing that you could get so injured from just rolling over in your sleep.
Yeah, you're telling me. It's still wild, but you know, I say it now, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. But I think that's what happens as you get older, right? You start to gain more perspective, and you understand just the ways of life a lot better.
Well, I think that's interesting. I mean, how do you see the connection between like mind body and influencing the self discovery of a human being?
Oh, it's just like mind, body, and soul, right? I mean, the reason even I started going on these intense hikes when I first started out was right. Like I tell everyone, like when you're like everyday life, right? We have so much stuff going on. So if you took a piece of paper, it's like just scribbling everywhere and doing doodles. And once you get in nature and you like start to get in the synchronicity of it, you could take the same piece of paper and you'd be drawing straight lines, and your thoughts actually become clearer and more evident. And I think that's something that people don't take enough time away, right? I mean, we are always connected to our cell phones and we always have something pinging us or something going on. And when you're in nature, the best part is that if you are truly alone and you're not distracted by different elements, you are actually able to focus on your thoughts and have them come in freely, and you actually can sit there and analyze them. And so it's difficult for me now as a nature photographer, honestly. So I actually struggle with that now because if I see something beautiful, then I'm like, oh my God, okay, I got to go capture this, right? And so it has changed over the years for me. But that's where I do a lot of road biking too. So I actually road biked like 3,000 miles over the last year,
Wow.
and that was because I found a different white space for me to be able to go and actually
Right.
address all those. So
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point in that there's something that's disassociative with wanting to capture it on the electronic device, right?
yeah,
And and so there's that inherent push pull of because I find the same thing. You know, I want to get B-roll for this show or something, and it's like some days I'm just like, no, everything's going to stay in their boxes, and I'm going to be Emmanuel the human doing my activity. Versus
yeah,
other days, you know, when I'll say, okay, well, we'll take 2 hours and I'll allow myself to be engaged as a capturing device versus just an experiencer.
yeah. I completely agree with that, and I think you know it's like you have to find different things that work for you. Like for me, the reason I do a lot of like we have a lot of 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado. We have 58 of them, so that's a really big thing here. And honestly, like I don't really have a desire to do them all, but if I really want to go think and develop my thoughts, I'll go do something higher in elevation gain because honestly, all of them pretty much look the same. Like you can get some cool shots, but they're pretty similar. So like to
Yeah.
me, it becomes less about the photography and more about the experience. But then there's other times where you know if you want to go shoot like a lush forest or waterfalls or something like that, you can still go do these longer hikes. So you still kind of it's almost like moving in and out of consciousness of what you're trying to focus on, right? And so it's difficult. I mean, even for me, I mean, I love storm chasing, I love lightning, and I love capturing it. But really, as a nature photographer, and this is where I think a lot of people don't realize it. It's like you're giving up your moment so that other people can enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult thing for me because there's some times like I love when you see like a good bolt of lightning, it is insane. But a lot of times you're just focused on that camera, so you can kind of miss it too.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah, I wonder how much of your time outside do you spend by yourself versus with other people?
I don't honestly like I don't spend a lot of time like hiking and stuff other than like I have some friends that'll hit me up like one of my buddies that's a fire captain out in Arkansas called me after he saw some of my snow stuff last year, and So he came out and did like a 9 mile snowshoe. And so like I'll kind of go with like certain spurts with people, but honestly, like a lot of what I do is kind of like a lone wolf mentality. And especially in the winter, I mean, I love, there's nothing like being on like an alpine lake while it's frozen and winds going everywhere. And also, you have some people that want to go do that, but you ask most people if they want to go out and shoot in 70-mile-per-hour winds, and they're going to say no. So a lot of the stuff that I do now, it's also a safety thing too, right? Like you have to really focus on your own safety as well. And when you start bringing other people into that, it becomes a different type of element. Or like, if you're trying to shoot this thing, and sometimes like I'll be on a frozen lake shooting for an hour, most people aren't going to want to sit around, doing nothing. So
Right.
it's a difficult element to have, and I don't mind doing things with people, but honestly, like now in my career where I'm at, I think it's just a lot easier for me to kind of focus on that, plus be able to still focus on my own psychology throughout all of it too.
Yeah, that's interesting. It makes sense. Are there some shots that are kind of on your bucket list that you're trying to capture that you haven't been able to yet?
I don't really have any like per se. I mean, I kind of just go off like the seam of my pants half the time. Like, I've got this idea of doing the Middle Teton up in the Grand Tetons, and like
Yeah.
I just want to go experience it, honestly, more than anything. But I know the views up there are pretty epic too. So, um, you know, I don't really have any urge or desires to do some of this mountaineering stuff. Like the idea of like being tethered to another human being is kind of scary to me, and then you're relying on someone else for your own safety. So again, it kind of just goes back to what I'm trying to emulate in life. But also there's a lot of like, I've really shifted my focus back to the Midwest the American West the last couple of years. I spent some time in Florida and had an awesome experience as an artist, and I loved being down there, and I got what I really wanted. But coming back home to Colorado, I realized how much like I love the ruggedness of the American West, and
Yeah.
I want to go do some stuff up in the Pacific Northwest again. But Colorado's home, and I love like everything we have here. So it's kind of cool just getting out and trying to do different things. And a lot of times you go to the same places, but you kind of have to open your eyes to seeing a different perspective too.
Yeah.
Like the shot behind me, I've probably gone to that same spot like 20 times, and I've never been able to get this shot again. And I took this on like my 2 cameras ago. It was like just a crop sensor camera in 2019, and I've never been able to get it again, even on better cameras. So it's not just the always the equipment.
Yeah. Wow. Well, yeah, and then just the seasonality of things, and whatever, if the fire goes through there or whatever, how
Yeah.
things change in a space like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it always changes, right? And that's what I love this about the season. It's one of my favorite parts of being in Colorado is you can go to the same place 4 different times of the year and you're going to get 4 different things.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Well, what sort of advice do you have for, say, a student of photography who is also a nature buff and is thinking about trying to make a career or make a go of it? What would you recommend?
I think it's just like go out and shoot. I mean, I took like 15,000 photos in my first 5 years, or first year, sorry. So you just have to go out and shoot. I mean, they say it takes 10,000 photos to actually become proficient at it, right?
Yeah,
So I think that's the beauty now of the way the digital realm is working with storage and everything else. It's so easy to just have a million photos on your hard drive, or I use Google Photos on my phone, and there's so much storage on that for relatively cheap. I
yeah,
think it's like 299 for 100 gigs. So, um, if you're looking to try to like actually expand your knowledge and the way you shoot, I mean, you just have to keep shooting. As far as the art side goes, it's really, really hard to sell photography now. I mean, especially with the advent of AI coming online, and people can really kind of go after what they want now. So it's becoming a little bit more difficult on the print side of things. Like if you do want to actually look at trying to sell print wise, you have to be on like an actual camera, because the thing that was funny at festivals was I'd have people come up to me and be like, "You want to see the best shot of your life?" And they'd show you their cell phone. And they're like, "So what you do? You blow it up to the size of this, right?" I'm like, "No, like you're gonna get like a 4x6 photo out of that, and that's about
right.
it."
Yeah.
And so I think it's just like grounding yourself in like what it takes to actually take a digital photo and then edit it, because that's its own process in and of itself. And then when you go to print it, like you have to understand the printing process. And you can, if you get with a good local printer, they'll kind of walk you through a lot of that and say, hey, like your photo's not going to print here, here, and here, or your colors are going to go this way or that way, or depending on the equipment they have, right? You can have either warmer or cooler tones. So you have to understand like your printer, and that's what they're there though for, is to help you through that process. So I think a lot of that stuff, it's just like this evolution of time, but not living just in a digital world. I think nothing to me really becomes real until it actually becomes into a print, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the digital world, you can hide a lot of stuff, and it's crazy. Like everything looks great on Instagram, right? But then you go see that same photo blown up, and it's just not the same. So it's just honestly, it's just tenacity and just discipline. Like, so many people, I'm not kidding, I have people all the time, they're like, I'm going to do what you do, I'm going to do it better. And I'm like, I hope you do. Like,
Yeah.
I literally like hope you have everything I've ever gotten and more, and you become everything you want. But you realize that people get so tied to the outcome, and they want to be this like Nat Geo published photographer, and they want to have all the shots and all the prints and do all the festivals and blah blah, but they don't like the process of doing it, right? So like,
Sure.
if you don't tie yourself to the process of it, I mean, I love the process. I actually like you have these big publishing opportunities, and they come to fruition, and you tell everyone about them, and it's awesome because you have all these people that believed in you all over all these years. They share in that experience. But
Yeah.
honestly, like I'll get published by something, and I'm like, sweet, that's awesome. What's next? Like
Yeah.
I'm not worried about that anymore.
Yeah, well, that's because you're an artist, right? And what we all as artists want to do is create, right?
Yep. Yeah,
And
100%.
occasionally somebody else likes it, but we always create something.
Yeah, absolutely. And selling your own work is hard. Like I actually don't enjoy selling my own work. Like I do a lot of stuff like fundraisers or a lot of like giving away my art too. So like I actually appreciate being able to change the world through that. And selling your art is just it's a business. It's
Yeah,
a totally different type of art, right?
yep, for sure. Well, what about for somebody like me, an amateur? Like, what are kind of two or three things that I should be thinking about when I'm taking shots that I'm going to show my friends of a big fish that I caught or a nice sunrise or something? What should I be thinking about constructing images?
So the biggest thing is like composure or exposure, sorry. So exposure, like always, like on your cell phones, even just like hitting like where your biggest highlights are, right? So you can touch a screen, and it'll kind of zoom in on that highlight, and then it's gonna create shadows in the rest of the area. But you can actually adjust those later through editing and pull shadows out and stuff like that. But if your exposure is blown out, then it's going to ruin your entire image.
Okay.
And kind of within that too, if you're focusing on something toward the sun, the lens flare on cell phone cameras gets like really ridiculous. So you can kind of start to shift around, or it'll create that green dot that's kind of refracting light too. So just being cognizant of like exposure is really key. And then, I mean, if you are going to get into trying to make it look better, like definitely having like a good editing app. And like I said, Google's editing app is actually pretty good. They've done a lot of adjustments on that the last few years. So um, having a good editing app for after the fact, but it has to be a properly exposed photo. And then just like framing, I think is very key too. I mean, the rule of thirds, if you break it down, there's 9 squares, and there's four dots where those intersect. So having something on each one of those and just
Uh-huh.
breaking it into thirds is always really key.
I like that. The managing the exposure is something I haven't paid attention to when I'm taking pictures. So that's something I'll add for sure.
It'll change everything. I think that's the biggest thing, because and you got to be careful, because if you have it where the exposure is so extreme, like one end is a lot of light and the other is a lot of shadows, when you go to pull the shadows up, that's where you'll start seeing like the noise and the artifacts kind of pull up into the shadows too. So it's really a balance. I mean, that's where composition comes into play. And I think with editing, it scares a lot of people. People don't like either, even when I started, I mean, I have a very like saturated, vibrant style, but I've honed it in over the years. And I think when people first start editing with stuff, it can look very fake or very gamey, something like that.
Yeah.
So I think there's finding a balance, and I think that's what takes over time, right? I mean, at this point, I've edited tens of thousands of photos, so you develop a style over time with that too.
Yeah. What's your overall image count in your storage now?
I'm like probably close to 110 or 120,000, something like that.
Wow.
So, which in 8 years is a lot. I've slowed down like the last couple of years. Just you you start to become like a lot more intentional with your photos, I think, as you go along, and you're not just like shooting and praying and all that kind of stuff. It just starts to you start to hone in a little more, and I think it's a good thing because you can hit burnout too. Like that's the other thing people don't realize. Like and to me, there's nothing worse. I actually hit burnout with mine when I actually went to go do that full time and sell my work and everything. And
Yep.
I think people have this like crazy idea about what it's like to be an artist, but it's really, really, really hard. And actually, this last weekend, I went to a festival and saw a bunch of my friends that I toured with in Florida. And, I give them kudos all the time because I'm like, you guys are doing something I can't do anymore. Like, it's so much work and it's so much pressure. And, when you're worried about, if you're going to be able to eat the next week because you need to sell some photos or something, it's like, that's totally different. So, like, honestly, in my recommendation to people is it's like, have like a full-time gig and then do it on the side. And if you really, really enjoy it and you figure out a way to make money on it and make it work, then that's awesome. And if you want to go pursue that, then that's great. But if you don't, like for me, it's way more meaningful now because I can have like my day job and I love what I do for my day job. And then like I love the artistic side of it too. So it really is best of both worlds.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that insight, and I just got one last question for you, which is, what are you looking for to have as your legacy of Jeremy over the course of your career?
Honestly, like I just want to be remembered as a good person. I've done a lot of stuff with my art and giving back, and just even with like children's hospitals and fundraisers for Colorado wildfires over the years and stuff like that. So I want people to remember me for that. But honestly, even now, it's like if I can change one life through the course of like my words or my actions or my photos, that's really what I focus on. And so that's why I am so open about like my mental health struggles and how that's tied into my nature photography and everything. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think it morphs as you go through time too, right? So, maybe it does become more about the mental health aspect down the road. I think there's always going to be a artistic and photography component just because it opens up so many doors. But
Yep.
at the same time, it's also about, who you are as a person and what you put into your images too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's great. How do people get in touch with you if they want to get a piece of art or have a conversation with you?
So you can either reach out. I have a contact on my photography page, which is just jeremyjanusphotography.com. I also have that on Facebook and Instagram as well, is just at Jeremy Janus Photography. So you can reach out on any of those, and I've got all my work on there. And then my website, I just have more stuff. If people are looking to learn, I have some photography resources on there. I have a Skillshare class people can take. So you can transfer that to cell phones, even if you're looking at doing that kind of stuff too.
That's cool. Yeah, your website is has got a lot of resources, and I'm a big fan of your Instagram posts. So keep putting resources up there too.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, I really appreciate your time, and I think it's great the work that you're doing and the motivation to make yourself whole and healthy, and to help other people make themselves whole and healthy. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Emmanuel.
All right. You have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nature Bound. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. If you found value in today's episode, please share with someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to purchase your copy of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock at emmanuelrose.com or on Amazon. We thank you again for joining us today, and remember to get nature bound.